All right, hello internet. I'm gonna be working on a side or side pets. Name will be stuck in my head forever. Poppy seed pets. That's apparently what it's called now. A smaller thing than it's going to be coding, but as I mentioned before, I kind of want to hit different aspects of the website. So there's going to be front end. I also wanted to say that hopefully the horrible noise we had, like there was a background wee noise on the whatever on the recording. Sounded like my tinnitus, but worse, which has gone away, thankfully. So, but mostly, every now and again, I feel like if I sleep on that ear such that it can't hear, then my brain gets freaked out again. But whatever. Over time, the hope is it goes away. But anyway, so we shouldn't have that horrible noise anymore. And let's just get into coding. The cat, whenever I start talking, she, I don't know, assumes I'm talking about her or to her or something. I don't know. It gets her attention. Hi, Mia. So the thing I want to do, now that we've got, and actually I want to do something else. So you may have noticed, let's talk about this. So I'm going to be doing more front-end work. And when doing that, I mean, this is what a browser would normally look like, right? But you can open up the developer tools. It's F12 in some browsers. You may notice I'm using Opera. It's essentially Chrome, a reskinned Chrome. There's other stuff going on, but whatever. So anyway, this will let me look at all kinds of stuff going on. In particular, so the whole architecture of this thing is that we've got the back end, which you saw me work on before when I did pet flavors. And that is an API, an application programmable, programmers, whatever interface, something with program. Once again, I'm bad with these acronyms. So that lives on the web, right? And this part that we're looking at here, and what I mean by lives on the web is that's actually a bit vague. That's not what I mean. But it operates a lot like a web page in a lot of respects. Like, I mean, I can show you what it looks like to load it up. So we can go to api.poppyseedpets. Yeah, let's go to the about page. So the API has URLs, but what makes it an API really is that it's not delivering web pages like most websites are or do. I don't know. Ooh, is it most? I don't know. I shouldn't say that, but probably. I don't know. Anyway, what it returns instead is JSON, which is a super popular way of transmitting data around. I talked about that a little bit in the last programming video. So you could play the game by hitting the API directly. You wouldn't use, by the way, your browser, because the browser doesn't kind of expose all the features you would need, because this isn't how you browse the internet, right? It's a web browser, not an API browser. But there are API browsers, if you want to call them that, available online. Insomnia is one that I use. There's another that's called Postman. Yep, that's another big one. So I think those are kind of the two big ones. So anyway, you could use those to interact with stuff. Like the sorts of things you can't do here are pass along credentials in the way it wants, or like post forms. But whatever, let's not worry about that too much. So anyway, this part is here. It's ugly, but that's okay, because we have this part that you're looking at now is a bunch of JavaScript that all it does is hits those URLs, looks at that data, and then updates the view accordingly. And we can see those calls get made here. So like if I click here, it pulled in the pet logs. And I can see here the pet logs, and this structures it a little more nicely if we checked. Yeah, so right, this is the same sort of thing, plain text, but it knows, it's like, oh yeah, JSON, the popular language of the internet. I know how to format that and display it to you in a slightly more pretty way. And here it is, right? So we can see all of the things that have happened. Roy beat up a giant toad, but lost. Here's pluses on experience and food, right? And those get, how is that a plus on food? That I don't know. Is that like an older one? I don't know. Actually, that's a little I can't explain that. And I feel like it's lying to me. But anyway, unless that's like some other log entry, I don't know. Or maybe that was a different pet, actually. I don't know. It is Roy. Was I looking at Roy? Here we go. I mean, it beat up. Okay, so here, yeah, it was a different pet. Okay, I was losing my mind. So anyway, right, here's the data, and then we render the website from the data. And the advantage of having the separation is that it would be very easy to make a mobile app, because I don't have to rewrite the whole backend. And this is a huge advantage over classic SciPets. And I don't want to like say bad things about Terrapets, because I think it's awesome that she made Terrapets, but Terrapets is built on that same kind of old architecture where everything is bound together. It would be very hard for her to make a mobile app. But having this is the very modern approach now. You make your API and your front end, the front end being the user interface that people interact with, totally separate, right? So whatever. And there's nothing wrong with doing things in the traditional way. A lot of web pages are still done that way. WordPress is done that way, and WordPress is, popular. It's also just crazy old, so that's why it's done in a very old way. But a lot of websites are done in that kind of classic fashion. But in this API thing, it's new, it's shiny, and it's a lot more flexible. Again, it would be very easy to make a mobile app because all I have to make is the front end. It can talk to the same API, or someone else out there, if you wanted to, you could make your own front end for poppy seed pets. I was about to call them Maslow's pets. It's going to take me a while to get used to the new name. So, which, I don't know, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's an interesting thing that other people could make their own front end. Yeah, so anyway, and you could imagine, I want to make a smartwatch interface, or I want to make, maybe you want to somehow VR the data or graph things by hitting the API. You could pull in data and, display them in interesting ways. So whatever, APIs are great. So anyway, why am I talking about this? So we have this front end, and that's where I'm going to be. There's definitely going to be some back end work to add the feature that I'm about to talk about. I haven't even really talked about yet. But there's going to be the front end work too. And so the part I showed you before, PHP with Symfony on top, that is the API part. This is all JavaScript, powered by Angular, which is a JavaScript framework. I think React, honestly, is a little more popular. And I would say, whatever, doesn't matter. They're both good. It's like the whole PHP framework. Which one do you want? I don't know. It's kind of up to you. A lot of them are good. Same is true here. People like Vue, people like Angular, people like React, and there's others as well. So anyway, I've gone off the beaten path. So what am I going to add? What I want to add, now that you can feed pets and start to learn something about them, or maybe they have like preferences on what their their skills are that you've kind of noticed as a player, you might want to take notes. And we have that feature in SciPets. And I would like to add a similar feature here. And I think I'll just do it by putting another tab here. I don't like how these windows move around. That's pretty gross. I don't know, a problem to solve another time. But what I want to add right now is another tab with note, and it will just be a text box, and you can hit save and it will save. The other thing though, so the thing I was talking about with this developers tool, it's great so we can kind of monitor the network traffic and look out for any weird bugs. And the other thing is it makes it, you can squish this much thinner. And specifically, I want to test in a mobile view. So at work, we have always thought that we need to do 360 pixels. That is 360 pixels wide. So you can see on the upper right here, it tells me the width, right? So this is 360. And that is the size of one of the older iPhones that I guess is still around. But I pulled up this site because I was like, man, 360 is awfully narrow. Do I really need to do that? So I looked around. I was like, there must be stats, right? People are collecting this information. Google for sure knows the answer, right? I mean, Google Analytics, we get that data. I'm sure Google themselves does too, to a degree. So this breaks down the most popular screen resolutions by country. This is kind of an overview of all of them, all the countries, and then you get this breakdown like the top 5 per country. I didn't see a 360 anywhere. 480 was as low as I ever saw, and most of them have higher, as you can see. So I want it to be playable on the minimum resolution, right? Like, and maybe you could say, well, they'll just rotate it to get 800 wide instead of 480, but whatever. Let's not make that requirement. So I'm going to do 480 just to test to make sure that things are looking good at 480. That's our kind of minimum width that the game is comfortable at. And it's a little misleading here. I don't think, or rather I do think that the browser includes the scroll bar, but on mobile devices, and there's another way you can do mobile devices this way. Right, so here's it showing me a 360. So you could do them this way, and this is a little more accurate in terms of the scroll bar isn't here, and it will let me click and drag as if I was touch and dragging. So it like vaguely emulates the you know what, maybe I should use this. I don't know why I don't use this most of the time. I guess just because it's easy to resize, and for the most part, I don't care about hitting it exactly. I don't even see a 480 around, so I'm just going to make my own 480. What would we see, like 480 by 800 or something? So let's do that. So yeah, so these are useful features for. Well, this, yeah, I don't want that. Can I undo? Nope, sure can't. This is a useful feature if you want to develop, especially for mobile. And again, this is reskinned Chrome is not giving Opera enough credit, but Chrome has all these same features, right? And so does Firefox. If you prefer Firefox, I don't know. Firefox used to be the big boy on the internet, but not so much anymore. So anyway, great, all that stuff out of the way. Let's start making this feature. So I'm going to start on the back end, and I'll show you a little bit of using that tool Insomnia to kind of poke at things. So the way I tend to do it, and I don't always, it just kind of depends on whatever. Hi again, Mia. Is I do the stuff on the back end first. I like set up the API URLs, like kind of like what we saw before, and build that all out and test it with, here's the tool, Insomnia. And so you can see, here's my local password. I don't care if you know my local password. Did the classic forward thing. So I use this to test, and again, if you know anything about APIs, you got to do post and get requests, whatever. Then I test out that the feature works. So I'll test, like, can I save the notes? Can I get the notes, right? Is all that working? And then once I'm sure that the API is working, then I go on to the front end and make it work there. And again, not always. Sometimes I actually start with the front end because I don't know. And often there's a back and forth because then I'll look at it and go, well, now I want to change a little bit. I'll do all the back end, then do the front end, and then realize once I've seen the front end that I want things a little different, or I'll do the front end and then on the back end realize that maybe there's some constraints or other things that I could change or make better or something that, so whatever. Doesn't really matter where you start, but it's an option. So whatever, let's start coding this thing. So I have a PowerShell thing here. So I don't know, I did this in the last video, but the thing to start with is we need a place to store that note. And actually let me pull up so we can look at this stuff. All right, and again, local passwords. So if you want to count characters, have a blast. Or like listen to there's something like that. I remember it was some sort of like meant to scare you thing, but in theory, if you hear someone type enough, or more accurately, if a computer hears someone type enough, the computer can eventually figure out the slight variations in the keystroke sounds, and then from that, figure out what it was that was typed, right? So that would be like a crazy thing that a virus or something could do. I guess would that count as a virus? I don't know. Anyway, so we have this pet table. It's got all these great fields. I'm just going to add a field here for the note. What is the note for the pet? Like, that's fine. It's only going to need one note. And again, the way we do that, because we're using this framework, we don't touch the database directly. We ask Symfony, our PHP framework, to do it. So I'm going to quote make an entity, and actually, sorry, I forgot. I'm not making a new one. I'm updating it. We'll notice that your entity already exists. Great. I'm just going to add it called note. And I don't know how long I want people to do. I think there does need to be some kind of limit on the length. 255. If I say string, it's going to be 255, and 255 characters isn't a lot. So let's do text, and let's limit you to like 1,000. Can it be null? No, it'll be an empty string. Okay, and we're all done. And then we make a migration. And then I double check. So I do, I've kind of mentioned with the migrations before how it's helpful when you've got multiple people. And for deployment, I don't have multiple people, but I do have multiple computers. Sometimes I work here at home. Sometimes I get my laptop and go to the cafe. So I'm actually a little worried that maybe I forgot to run a migration. So I'm just going to check out this new one and make sure it only did the thing I wanted. Drop an index and add a unique. I suspect that that's from some previous migration that wasn't run. So let me delete this and run migrations. Document migration, migrate. No migration. Then why did it do that? Did I? Maybe I edited a thing and was a bad programmer and didn't. On the item, drop some sort of index and add a unique index for the tool ID. I don't know. I guess I made a change and forgot to make a migration. So, okay. Let's run the migrations. I'll trust that it knows better than I do. Like, its evaluation of the state of the database in my code is certainly more accurate than my memory. So I'm inclined to believe it. And I am a little curious. So sometimes, great. So one thing that can happen is if your database is a particularly weird version, like I've noticed this at work, but not so much here. But in some versions of Symfony, you have to tell the database what is the version of the database, and if it gets it wrong, if you have a mismatch, it'll like look at your database but look at it wrong, keep creating the same migrations over and over and over again, like the same logic of, oh, I need to change this field type to non-nullable. Oh, I need to do it again. I need to do it again every single time. So I was just curious, it's like, am I in that weird situation? I just wanted to make double sure, again, since I didn't remember making this change. But anyway, sorry. Okay, we've got a new field, and we should see that reflected here. We have a new note field, fantastic. So the other thing to do, and this, it's on the back end but related to the front end, is when you look at these JavaScript responses, what it's doing is it's taking these columns and returning them out to the user via these URLs. But not all the information is available to the user. For example, favorite flavor, that's a hidden column. And one thing that we have to do, like, I don't want to return it here in the data, and that just not happen to show it on the left side. There's two reasons not to do that. One, you're sending more data than you need, so it's just more bandwidth, although that's the smaller concern. I think the bigger concern is that you can't assume that people aren't going to poke through this, right? If the information should be hidden, then it's hidden. Don't send it out of the API. Like, the worst example would be to send, like, when you were browsing, so we can look at the directory of players. Wouldn't it be awful if, even though it didn't seem like it, because you're not seeing them here, you could see people's email addresses, because email address is on the table with ID, last activity, their name, their list of pets, what date they registered on, right? All that stuff and more is on the table, but we only want to return, a very specific set. We don't want to return too much information. So, of course, kind of on the flip side, I added this new field, but it's not going to be returned anywhere by default because I've locked everything down. So there is a feature for that. We go to the pet. It's going to have a new field. You can define these named groups, and when you send the data back out through the API, you can say, hey, I want you to turn this pet into JSON, called serialization. We talked about serializing a little bit in the last programming video as well. But I want you to collate all this data, put it in a nice JSON string, and I want you to do it using this group or set of groups. You could say, like, I only want you to use the my pet group. And so then it will go through all this data and look, anything marked my pet. And also, if that field was a related field, and another thing we saw last time, right, when I was talking about databases, like, actually, let's say public pet profile. So when you're looking at the pet's profile, yeah, it should do ID and owner and name. Oh, but wait, owner is actually a user entity. So if we go into user, we're going to find pet public profile things here. Like, it digs in, it drills down into all these things and keeps going and finds here's a user public profile. Okay, we need to know the ID of the user as well when we're looking at the pet. We need to know the name of the owner. So it drills down, figures it all out. Sorry, me jumping on my lap again. And then right, magically transforms it and returns it out as beautiful JSON. So anyway, I need to go back to the pet, and for the pet note, which it will be a new column, I want to add a group for that. I think it would just be for when we're doing my pet. I'm just going to copy this part of it. And this is a little thing, right? It's like, well, how do I know which one to use? Well, I kind of have memorized it because I've done this before, but I made this whole thing, and so some things stick. But if we look at the pet controller, or actually, let's do this. Let's go home, and we can see what it hits. So it goes to, what URL is that? /pet/my. So that will be pet controller /my. It gets all the pets, and it uses serialization group my pet. This is another one of my fake enums. And I talked about in the last programming video how I had a thought for how to make the enums a little more behave like true enumerators. But anyway. So anyway, yeah, use that serialization group my pet. Serialize pets, great. So that is the one I want. This is the URL. I would like the note data to be added here. And in fact, I guess it already should be. Also, one other thing. So we can see that a bunch of other stuff came in here that I care less about inspecting. Like, I don't care to look at the SVGs. All I care about are these API calls. How can I separate those out? Can I? That would be useful. You can. See, it's XHR. Oh my gosh, I don't even remember what that stands for either. But you can separate these out into various things. What do I want? Just the root. Oh, actually. Oh, yeah, I know why. Because I was going to say it should only be the root document, but actually it's used in not quite an iframe, but Anyway, so you can say, you know, oh, I just want the images, I just want the CSS, I just want the JS. And I think the reason we're not seeing, because there's plenty of JS, is just that, yeah, it was like already loaded when I looked at the page. When you open this panel, it doesn't like show you all the things that happened before. It's not recording them because that would affect the performance of the browser for casual users. It's, you know, they don't want to mess with people just to help out developers. So it's not logging this stuff when the thing isn't open. So that's why we didn't see this. So anyway, great. Yes, I only want the XHR. I wonder if that X stands for XML, because old requests used to be all about passing XML, but now we use JSON, which is what AJAX. I don't know if you've heard the acronym AJAX. That's what I would expect this to be called. No, it's not. What is XHR? Because I remember that from jQuery. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Again, it's like, I don't care what the letters stand for. I know what it means. So anyway, which is less good for communicating to other people. So we've got our our pets, and whoa, that's inventory, sorry. And I already added, yeah, the note thing. So here, now we've got the note data coming in because I have added that, that serialization group name to the note field. So now that the front end has it, now we can start displaying it on the front end. So I will open up that, and now we're finally doing a new thing maybe. Sorry, I had to find which window that was. All right, so this little pop-up, I believe I called that component, oh, it's a dialog. I put all my, so the whole thing with Angular, and React is this way as well, is that you can kind of think of it as making up your own tags. If you're familiar with HTML at all, right, you can be like, oh, here's a div, it's just kind of general container. Here is a button, right? Here, and B to make things bold, although I actually don't use that anymore. Strong to make text look strong, which is usually rendered bold. H2 for header of level 2, whatever, right? So you have all these things, but with Angular, you can make up your own. So you can be like, oh yeah, @messages, that's a new tag I just invented. And then you tie up a bunch of JavaScript to those. And so it makes things very reusable. You can say, you know, every time I display a pet, I don't want to have to recode that on every single page. I just make a component that says render a pet, and that will go grab, you know, its equipment and position it and rotate it properly, right, and all those things. And then I can use that in multiple places. So we can have it on the user directory, right? If I look at a user, right? I don't want to have to redo this 3 times. And so on the front end, you just say, yeah, I've made a new component. It's called make a pet or something. I don't remember what I called the component. We could find out. So app pet appearance, apparently. And it prefixes everything with app. I think you might be able to change that prefix. I haven't bothered to find out because I don't care. That's a fine prefix. And you might not even be able to, honestly. So anyway, all the dialogues as well, all these little pop-ups, the individual dialogues are also components. And I have sorted all my components in various ways. Kind of everything is a component. But I have put any components which represent entire pages in their own thing, and which are dialogues in their own thing, just to organize things for my own, you know, sanity. So anyway, there should be interact with pet, and we can see that has a totally custom tab thing. There's a popular library out there called Angular Materials, which uses Google Materials' style guide, basically. You may have heard of like Bootstrap. That's been around longer. It's a similar thing. It's like, this is what we think, I don't know, checkboxes should look like. This is what we think buttons should look like. This is what we think X, Y, and Z. This is what all the components should look like, and it's just styled. Google made their own and was like, hey, if you want things to look, and if you've used an Android phone, you know, the way that you click a checkbox and the circle radiates out from where you tapped and all these things, that's all part of their material designs, and you can get an Angular plugin that just gives you all that stuff. Angular was originally created by Google, so I mean, whatever, it's not surprising to see a Google thing in Angular because Google was Angular was created by Google in the first place. But I mean, I'm pretty sure that Materials has made it elsewhere as well, not just Angular. But anyway, I don't use it. They have their own thing for tabs, right? Tabs are another component that, what was it? Bootstrap has, you know, here's what tabs would look like. Here's how you'd mark them up. Google's Materials do. I like doing it all myself. I don't know why. I don't like their particular style. I mean, it's okay, but I like laying these things out myself. I made an accordion thing recently that kind of modeled after how they have done it. I mean, I certainly look to how they've done things, but my tabs are pretty rudimentary. So anyway, here's my little tab system. The point is we're going to add a new tab. So This little disabled class, I have some general styling that just makes everything look dimmed out. So you can see that when I click pet here, it dims the whole thing. Oh, it's useful. Oh, also, it's reloading the app because I made any changes. So that's another thing. When you develop Angular locally, they call it hot reloading. If you make it and save any changes, it just reloads the whole app, which is nice because you can see things immediately. But sometimes, you're in the middle of something and you're like, I forgot. It's going to do it. So anyway, I give things this disabled class if anything is loading. We would want to change the note tab, which doesn't mean anything yet because that doesn't exist, but I'll make it. Note. And then here we have all these little tabs, and if just means like don't even put this thing on the page at all if these things aren't true. I mean, if you want to learn Angular, that's a whole other thing. And there's a lot of information online. There's also some interesting courses on Udemy. I learned by taking a course on Udemy. My work paid for it, but also, so if you go to the Udemy site and you look at courses, it'll be like $300, whatever. They're on sale for like 90% off 90% of the time. And they even do funny things. I totally noticed this, and this is something our marketing guy wants to do at our work for our products. So Udemy does this thing where if you look at a course, but you don't buy it, if you go back a little later, it might like be $5 cheaper because like, oh, we know you looked at it, So they're trying to entice you to buy. But yeah, so anyway, you can pay $15, $20, and take some awesome courses on Angular. And it depends on what you know. I mean, some of them assume more or less. The one I took was like, yeah, we assume you already know TypeScript or are willing to kind of learn it on your own. And I was like, yeah, perfect. I basically know TypeScript, so I'm good. But if you didn't, then you might have more trouble with a course like that. So that's something to keep in mind. So anyway, here's a little tidbit. So we want a note, and the note we're just going to do a text area, and we do this ng model. Oops, and we want it to be I believe the pet's note. Pet should have a note column, or note field. And Angular just does this magic thing where you're like, oh, I just want you to, here's a variable. That's what's going to be the contents of the note or this field or whatever. And then as the user types, it just updates that immediately. Yeah, it's great. Angular is great for, and all the things are like that. React and Vue, they all have this two-way binding. So it's not like you have to go Angular if you want that super sweet feature. And then I'll put the little button bar on the bottom. You can see it's reloading in the background. Button type equals button. Actually, we can do submit because I should probably wrap this whole thing in a, well, no, no, because pressing enter, yeah, whatever. Okay, and we'll call it save. And when you click it, we're going to call a function called doSaveNote, which I haven't defined yet, but it's fine. We'll get there. The other thing I noticed, so I mentioned how on the back end, you have to tell it, oh, for this serialization group, my pet, include this note field. On the Angular side, you don't have to do this, but I did it again for that, IDE helpfulness. You may have noticed when I typed pet here, it's like pet, what? Do you want name, color, species, image, all these things? I know that they have them. I haven't told the front end yet that name is a property that can be found on this pet. Sorry, not name, note. Right, so it gets confused, like, I don't understand, maybe not, which is a general word? So what I have done for every serialization group on the API side, I make a class, or actually an interface for silly reasons. Not silly reasons, it's whatever, the TypeScript stuff beyond the scope of what I'm talking about. But anyway, again, just to give me the IDE help, like I want it to be able to autofill those things for me. So I'm going to add the note field here. It's a string, done, and now I'll have that type hinting. And again, that helps, right? If I had typoed something, if I was like Nato, I'd be like, wait, what's going on? Oh, I typoed. Here we go. Now I'm getting the autocomplete. Therefore, I'm doing the right thing, right? Very useful. All right, so let's see. Hopefully it's not going to reload. So great, we have the note. Is that the label or something? Oh no, I gave it like a little heading. That was copied. I just saw that above from like the current tool thing. We don't actually need that, so we don't need this heading at all. All we need to do now, and I'll put this in a P as well, just to give it the padding or margin on the bottom so that it, and the buttons class is, it's just, again, I've kind of made my own styling framework, essentially, if you want to call it that, like Bootstrap or Materials or whatever. That just tells it, oh, there's going to be buttons in here, line them all up, in a line like we're seeing here. So whatever. Anyway, great. So now we've got that little spacing. So now I just have to hook up the save button to actually do anything. The other thing is though, so I notice that this doesn't take up the full width, and I bet that if I go, well, it doesn't even get wider anyway. But I would like this text area to take up the full width. So I don't think there's any other text areas in here. That's okay. We'll just say class note, or actually, there's only going to be one. Well, oh, yeah, whatever. So I'll just add the CSS and quick CSS to do that. Width should be, oops, 100%. And again, Angular is like, oh, changes. Oh, I better reload. Kind of freaking out. So how long have we been recording? 30 minutes, and we're almost done with this thing, right? Like, it's not going to take much. All right, so it's the full width. We have this nice resize if you want it in the browser. It's kind of funny how it like, that's not my fault. That's up to, maybe Chrome actually does it better and Opera is just a little janky. I don't know. Or maybe it happens in Opera too, or Chrome too. Maybe Internet Explorer somehow is the good one. Or Edge, I'm sorry. Mia, I know you want to sit on my lap, but I'm trying to record a thing. All right, and type, which is the main problem because her tail like smacks my chin and gets in the way of my arms, which is cute at times, like when I'm walking or watching things on YouTube. All right, so now we just have to hook up the save thing. Which I say just, there's going to be a little more. And didn't I say I was going to test this with Insomnia? If I was doing something more complicated, or I was going to do like a bunch of validation, like the register stuff, or adopting a pet, or where there's names and which pet do you select and all this stuff, if it was more complicated, I would. In this case, it's literally one field we're going to pass, so I'm just cruising, and I wasn't even thinking about it. I'm kind of justifying after the fact, but I don't usually think about it. I just kind of do it in whatever order makes sense to me. Often that means starting on the back end, but in this case, apparently not. I thought I was going to do that. Maybe we'll do it anyway just to demo once I get this part hooked up. So let me make the do save button. So this is all part of that component stuff, right? It's like, well, where does that get, you know, where are we going to put that? We're going to put that in this interact with pet component. It has this TypeScript part. TypeScript is a, I don't know if you want to say a flavor of JavaScript. The HTML part and the CSS part all wrapped into one component. So we just define new functions here, and it knows to use them. So yeah, I guess we'll put it in here. Why not? Save the note. And when we save the note, we need to hit the API, and we haven't made this endpoint yet. So let's go ahead and make that. We need some sort of URL that we can hit with the new note data and have it get saved. That part doesn't exist yet. So I'm going to put that in the pet controller. Makes the most sense. It's related to pets. So first we define the route, which is what they call the URL. I'll do that in a sec. I want to remember that this is a post request. So, and I'll copy this because I can never memorize it, partly because I copy it. So an important thing on the internet, there are a couple different ways. There's like 4 different ways, but I only ever bother to use 2. I don't know. I should probably be a better programmer and use all of them. Actually, I think 5. Whatever. Well, and there's like options and stuff. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Look. Okay. Get and post are the basic ones. A get request is, and you can see the type. So a get request is what your browser does for everything. Anytime you hit a URL, you're making a get request. And that's kind of the limitation. That's why it's a bad browser for APIs, because the other types of requests you might make are post requests. There's also all these guys, which again, I'm not using. If you wanted to delete something, then you should use the delete. You should require people to use the delete request. So really the URL isn't the only part of a request. I mean, there's a lot of parts, but you look at a URL and go, oh, that's the whole story. It's like, well, there's all this other stuff going on. And the other, I would say, big one is what is the method? And I mean, you're like, well, what does that mean? It really doesn't mean anything. It just means a string got passed along that said, hey, I want a delete as well. I don't know if that, I don't think that shows up in the headers as we see them, but I mean, all this stuff is just text, right, sent between machines. So it's just saying, here's a URL, and also I want get, or I want to post, or I want to delete, or I want to whatever. And they're used by various things by the browser. The browser does do other things behind the scenes, like you may have seen, now we're not seeing them here. Sometimes there will be an options request before one of the requests. But anyway, the browser also, so when you submit a form, usually that's a post request. And the reason, and browsers, like the reason why it's usually is just because of how browsers have said, this is what we're going to do. So it's like, look, everyone agrees. and this is how browsers are built, when you do a GET request, I might cache that. I'm going to save the result, so when a future GET request is made, maybe I don't even actually make it. And so this is commonly done for images, right? Like, it doesn't keep going out and downloading the Candy Maker's Cookbook image over and over and over again. Your browser says, it's a GET request. Those I am happy to cache the results of. So once I've done that, I'm not going to actually make that GET request when something asks me to again. When the browser's web page says, hey, I've got an image, here it is, I need to go to this URL, the browser's like, I won't actually hit that URL, I've already got the image. Post requests are never cached, and you can't bookmark them. The browser doesn't let you, whatever. If you share it with someone, a post, it's not going to work because they're going to click on it and it's going to do a GET. But anyway, and some other things go on there. But like how you pass the data, there's no way in the URL to do post data. You can do extra GET data this way. You can do like search equals Ben or something, like a Google search would look something like that at the end. But you can't. There's another way to pass data along that is used by post requests that you can't mess with. So anyway, the fact that browsers don't cache them and won't cache them means that then for the API side, since we know that, we do only requests that change data. So the way to look at it is every GET request, since a GET request can be cached and the browser might not actually ask again for it, you shouldn't make any changes for a GET request, like on the server side. If the client comes to me and says, hey, I want this URL, it's a GET request, I shouldn't make any changes to my data behind the scenes, because actually they might not even get to me. They might, the browser might go, GET request, never mind. I've cached the data locally. And when you click back through your browser, same thing, right? When you click back and go through your browser history, it pulls up those pages super quick because it's already got them cached. Your browser's like, I'm not even going to bother. So if your application was like relying on that GET request to do some kind of action, then it wouldn't work. Post requests are never cached. And again, because they're kind of harder, like you can't make a link in, I don't know, where's like a link, like write this pet shelter. That's a GET request somewhere. And you can't make one of these, just a link you click, be a post request. You can with JavaScript and stuff. But if you see a plain text link, whatever. Now it's harder because of JavaScript. But anyway, there's some security there. It's harder for someone to accidentally make a post request. So like you couldn't put a link on a web page somewhere that would make a post request to change someone's password or something. And those are the types of places where you would use a post request, where you need a little more security, and you've got that security because of how browsers are doing post and get. So whatever. So the bottom line is, I worry I've rambled. Did that become super uninteresting? I don't know. The point is, post requests change data, GET requests don't, and that's how you know when you do one or the other. Like that's the biggest factor. There are sometimes other silly reasons because of like limitations on the amount of data you can pass with a GET request and everything that you might make a post request. But that's the general rule. Yeah, I think that's really all there is to say about that. Yeah, and the reasons you wouldn't want to mix them up if you made, the data, like if a Google search had to post the search data, like the search term, if you were searching for cute cats and then you wanted to send that URL to someone else, it wouldn't include the post data. It couldn't contain the post data, and so you wouldn't be able to share that link. Another reason when you would be, then I need it to be a GET request, not a post. So anyway, and again, that's kind of correspondingly, you can't share a link that resets someone's password for them on accident, because it had better be that when you make your application, this is kind of what the point is, when you make your application, don't you ever make a GET request that can change someone's password or email address or something else, or make any change to their account, because then people can do sneaky things and screw up other people's accounts. So it's a big security thing. So anyway, this is going to change pet data. Since it's going to change data, it should be a post. And again, if you want it to be like super fancy, I always forget because I don't use it enough, but I believe either post is meant to make updates and puts makes brand new things, or vice versa. I always forget. But then there's also patch. I didn't even remember patch. And then delete would be if you wanted to delete something, like, I'm throwing away this item. You could imagine that would be a delete request. I only use get and post. I don't know, a lot of APIs do. It's kind of the lazier way to go. basically good enough for a lot of purposes. But if you're being super proper, and I don't know I'm giving it that tone because again, I should probably be being super proper. But anyway, so if you're doing super proper, you would use get, post, put, and delete. And I don't even know what in the world patch is about. Now I'm a little curious. And then again, like options is mostly used by the browser to get some information about a request before it makes the request. And then head, I don't even actually remember. I think that's some other internal thing that most people wouldn't do manually. So anyway, that was an awful lot of rambling. We're going to let you, I guess we'll say update note. And then what you call, Symfony doesn't care what you call the function, like the function's name actually doesn't mean anything as long as it's unique. So when we do this fancy thing, we can pass in, we can make a variable. As long as this name matches that name, then it will automatically get the pet out of the database who matches this ID number. Because it's a database entity, it's only going to do it by ID. It like does this extra cool smart stuff. But we do need to make some other checks. So we're going to get the current user, which is get user, and we know there's a user because we've required that they be authenticated. But we want to make another check. We don't want people to update a pet that doesn't belong to them. So if the pet's owner, I should just type it. If the pet owner ID isn't the user's ID, right? If those things don't match, then you're doing a bad thing. And you're right, you can see I did that down here, and I just throw a not found. So it'll come up as a 404. So if someone tries to modify a pet that doesn't belong to them, it's going to say, that wasn't actually found. A more honest thing to do would be to say access denied. You don't have permission to mess with that. But I don't know. In this case, it doesn't matter. I'm just in the habit of basically lying. You lie to the user to say it just doesn't even exist. That way they don't know the difference, so that they can't like keep trying in weird ways. It's just a way to like throw people off a little bit, make it less convenient for people who might be, you know, up to no good. In this case, it's a little silly because pet IDs are public. You can just see them, right? If you're up to no good, you're already looking at the API. You can see a pet ID. You know it exists. But it's just the habit I'm in now. It seems like right, it's a good habit. Just don't give people more information than they need, especially if you think they're up to no good, or might be. And actually, here's an interesting thing. I said, oh, if you try to feed that. So, okay, I did it a little differently here, actually. So this is, I do actually tell them for some reason, that's not your pet if you try to feed them. I don't know why I did that, because I'm inconsistent. I'm an inconsistent human. You know what? I'm going to change it. It should be a not found. Or did I do it for the reasons I'm talking about? So one reason you might want to give more information would be, suppose that you have two instances of the browser open, or of the website open in different tabs, and in one tab you like throw away an item, or maybe sell it, you know, so whatever. Yeah, that would be a good example. It's sold and now is owned by another player, but your other tab doesn't know about that because you have been taking the actions on, you know, the other tab. Then the user might try to act on the item, forgetting, and it would be nice in that case to be like, oh, hey, that item doesn't belong to you, because then they're going to be like, oh, yeah, I sold it in the other tab, that's my fault. Whereas if you just say it's not found, they're going to be like, what do you mean it's not found? It's right here, I can see it. So those are reasons why you might want to give more information. I don't know, I haven't worried about that as much. I worry about that more on a classic app where I feel like there's more to be gained by operating in multiple tabs, because loading up individual websites can be slow, whereas here things open crazy fast because there's no pages. It's all JavaScript just fetching bits of data. I mean, it's slower on my local machine too, as I've mentioned before. But anyway, all this talking, you know, I said, like, oh yeah, I'm almost done 13 minutes ago, and then I started talking about get requests and post requests and security things. So anyway, if the pet isn't owned by you, then get the hell out of here. Let's get the note out of the request data, which means we're going to need the request data. Please give it to me, Symfony. It will just give it to me. And because, I don't know why they've done this. I kind of do. So there's request and query, yeah. So a post data comes in through the variable called request, and get data comes in through the variable called query. And that always throws me off because the names don't match. Why isn't it just get and post? Well, the reason is get they're using for other things, I think, is honestly the real reason. But it is part of the query string. That's not an unfair way to refer to it. I don't know where the hell request comes from. I feel like that should just be post, but whatever, it's not. So we want to get the note out. And that name, where does that name come from? I mean, it makes sense intuitively, but we're going to have to use that name on the client side in a little bit. Oh, also it should default to an empty string, and also I want to trim whatever input comes in. You can use, so one other feature of Symfony is they have this whole form handling system that like validate fields, do a bunch of sanitation like trimming everything and do all this stuff for you. But it's really tightly integrated with the review layer stuff called Twig that handles it. It's more for traditional web pages, and it's hard to separate. Maybe that's better in recent versions of Symfony, I don't know. But I've just gotten in the habit of not using it. And the kind of validation I'm doing for API requests is usually very simple anyway. It's like, you gave me a number, right? You gave me a non-empty string, right? Like, I don't need a framework to figure that out for me. For like things like the registration form where there's like 10 fields, it would have been handy and useful to have their forms to handle it for me. But again, since it seems to be kind of tightly coupled to their traditional web page stuff, I haven't been able to use it. And also, again, maybe that's different in recent versions of Symfony. I don't know. They may have improved that. They do seem to be moving more toward, oh yeah, APIs, that's a thing. But anyway, so yeah, so if the note is an empty string, then actually that's fine. We don't care if the note is an empty string. You're allowed to empty it out. In a lot of cases, we would say, if you gave me an empty string, then I would throw an unprocessable entity exception and say, you know, you need to provide something. But in this case, you don't. You're allowed to clear it out. And then all we have to do, again, I've been doing all this talking, we just have to set the note to the note, and then we're done. More or less, we're going to need an entity manager interface because we're going to need to tell the thing that this is responsible for talking to the database. You have to tell the database, hey, we're all done with our changes, go and make them happen. That happens there. And I also have this custom response service to do some serialization. So anyway, EM, we need to flush, which tells it, hey, database, I know I've given you this work to do. Now actually go and do it all. And the reason it's separate like that is it's possible that you want to do like 20 things and you don't actually want to do every 20, you know, each one of those 20 things individually. You want to do it all at once at the end. It's much more performant that way. So anyway, the doctrine has forced you to separate them out. So you just flush it a minimal number of times if possible. Anyway, and then we are going to return with my response service as a custom thing. I wanted to make sure that all my API requests follow the same format of, there's a success thing that tells you true or false, whether or not this request was successful. It almost always includes your user, so that if there were any changes to your user entity, the client can get it and update, like if your money's changed or whatever. And then any data that might be there, or error messages might appear, or pet activity might appear as another field. And that's all standardized. Again, I wanted every single request to be the same, because by doing that, then on the API side, I can have just one set of code that handles all the requests, and it works out beautifully. Right? By being standard, I make myself do less work. So great. And that should be it. So here's the part where we could test it manually. So let's look at this pet. This is pet number 24. So let's use Insomnia now to try and, right, his node is empty, but let's use Insomnia to post to that endpoint and set the note. So I'm just going to copy this. This isn't exactly, so this will be update pet note, say, and this is going to want to be a post request because we told it to be. The body will be JSON, and then we're actually going to do 24 update note, I believe I called it. Whoops, where did my windows are everywhere. Update note, it's a post request. And you could list these. If you wanted one request to accept multiple kinds, you could do that. I've never found a compelling reason to ever want to do that. And then we said that we're going to have a property called note. So we're going to make that, and we're going to make the note property be, this is a test note. And this should work. Oh, it won't work. So I also need the authorization header. This is another thing you can't set in a browser, right? Your browser doesn't give you all these extra things. But we need, oops, a token, and I can find that token by looking, because the API has been sending it all along. Hi, Mia. Where did it go? Should be a token in here. Let me see. Oh, maybe not for logs or something. In the world, request headers. Am I just looking in the wrong place? Yes, authorization. No. Where did it go? These should all have headers, or these should all have, that's the response header. I want the request header. Why does it say provisional headers are shown? Let me try and do something that posts. Like, let me throw out a yellow dye. Here we go. They should all have that. I don't know what's happening. Anyway, that's the token I need. So when you log in, it generates a token for you, and then subsequent requests to the API, rather than sending your username and password to authenticate you, send this token. Symfony has ways to hook all this stuff up well, I don't want to say easily. It is actually kind of a pain, but there are tutorials. And the reason you do that is just so you're not sending the password over the internet all the time. We're, of course, using HTTPS, so it's a little less important, but whatever. So great, so this should work now that I have the right thing. Unsupported protocol. What are you talking about? JSON. Oh, I missed the H at the beginning. That would be the protocol. Great, and we could test some things just to demonstrate, right? Like if I take off this J, it's going to say you're not, right, you've been logged out due to inactivity. That's just what it assumes. It's not actually true. And if we tried to hit a pet that wasn't ours, like pet, I don't know, 23, it should say object not found. So in that case, that one doesn't exist. And that's kind of a weird, I want to customize that message. So what that's doing, or where that comes from, is that is Symfony's automatic response. We said 23, it tried to find pet 23, and pet 23 legitimately doesn't exist. And so it's like, I can't complete that, and it freaks out. I would like to display a different message. I just kind of take the message as given. I'm sure there's a way to customize that. I just haven't figured it out yet. Let's do like pet 1. I want to find one. Oh, maybe I own pet 1. That might be Roy. So I probably changed 2 of them. Okay, here's one with an error, empty string for a not found. And we got a 404 not found, so good enough. So anyway, I have presumably saved that data. We should be able to confirm that by looking in the database. Let's just do one step at a time. This is a test note. And then when we look on the front end, oops, I think they'll have already been, yeah, because I changed it in a, it's not refreshing the pet data here constantly. But now it should have pulled it in. Oops, I went too fast. I need to fix that. There's a test note. And let's just, I don't know, let's make them a little different so we can, I don't know. Roy likes fruity things. That I've discovered is true. All right, and again, we'll need to reload because it isn't fetching that new data, constantly. That would be bananas. Roy likes fruity things. There's a test note. Great. So now that we know that everything works, we just have to tell the API to do the same thing. Post to this URL, passing a thing called note, and we're done. And then the whole feature works. So, and that is pretty easy to do. And I maybe will not ramble about other things. All right. So I do this. So I've got this little kind of formula I follow. If we're currently loading things, then get out of here. You're not allowed to save because I'm already doing stuff. Okay, now set the little flag that says I'm doing stuff if we've made it this far, right? And then we're going to post, and I'm going to go for pet, whatever the current pet ID is, and we want update note. And we need some data this time, and the data is there's going to be a note property, and it's going to be the pet note, which someone has set. And then you have to subscribe to know when things happen. And then we're just going to say the loading is done. When it gets back to us, then the loading is done. And that's it. Sorry, I don't need a response variable, actually. That part's easy, right? If I hadn't rambled so much, I would have been done way before 50 minutes. So here's a note. There's a test note. Let's say mole is a mole. That sounds legit. Save. I do the dimming effect, and it shouldn't let me. So I don't know. I mean, that's hard because whatever. It stops me from clicking many times. I actually don't know why this should look dimmed out. I thought I had handled that styling already. I don't have the disabled class on the whole thing, but I should. Do I put it somewhere else for some reason? I was putting it on the buttons. It should just be on the whole thing. Whatever. I'll put it there for now. I'll look at that later. But I want that thing to be dimmed out so you're not like editing while it's in the process of saving, right? Because then things get confusing. Comment or disable the fields. Oh, sorry, I actually want to edit him. Roy likes fruity things. Exclamation, exclamation. Dim everything out, please. Now it's saved. Great. It might be ideal to give you some feedback to say, hey, it's been saved. And let's just see what happens. Also, so this, I've done kind of a thing. I'll show you a place where this isn't working. if I delete this but don't actually save it, I have remembered I've tied it to that pet variable, and the pet variable isn't, we're setting it, and so that's the data on the page. Let me go show you, right? We're saying that this is tied to the pet's note. So it just updates that, and when we come back, it still has that note. So this actually isn't the best way to do this. We probably want to, if you cancel out and don't save anything, we want to reset it back to its old value. And actually, the easier way to do that would be to edit a different field and update the pets field only when we successfully save. So let's make a new field called pet note, which I don't know, that might be a little confusing. And we will make, I don't know why I made these all public, you don't need to do that. We'll make it an empty string, but when we come in here, then we will say this pet note equals this pet note. Great. And then when we save, we will pass our pet note variable, and when we succeed, then this pet note equals pet note, right? So when the dialog is first opened, we set the pet note variable to be the pet's note, and then only when they hit save do we actually go back and update the thing. And actually what we should do, because it's possible that the request fails for some reason, like they've been logged out, something else like that. So you can specify next means it was a success. If it was a success, we should do all these things. But if it errored for some reason, and this is just, you just got to Google this. This is just standard. RxJS is the name of the library that it's not just an Angular thing. It's out there. Other things use it, but it's called RxJS, and it has a lot of stuff for doing these subscriptions and all this stuff. And so this next error stuff, that's their standard. That's not like some weird SciPet specific thing that I made up. But anyway, so if it fails, what we want to do, well, first of all, loading should still become false, but also the pet note we want to reset. So, well, yeah, if you hit save and it fails, we'll set it back. You will see an error message though, so I kind of wonder if we shouldn't do that. Like, I'm just trying to think of the use case. Like, so you post save, it says, whoa, actually you've been logged out or something while you were sitting here waiting. Is there a reason to reset the field back? I don't think there is, because they're going to see that message. It's going to say error, I failed. So that's probably fine. Ah, gosh, Mia, what are you doing? So yeah, so we won't replace anything. We'll just leave everything untouched, right? So okay, so let's see if that works. So if we open the pet and we take this out, if we tab around, it's still going to have that note. Maybe that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. But now if we reopen it, it should be reset. Great. And only when we hit save, like he likes fruity things, save, and now we reopen it. Great. Now everything works beautifully. We have pet notes, and now I will deploy this to the game, and everyone will be able to add notes for the pets. So I don't know. I'm sorry that went so long. I do worry that I rambled a little bit long about the get post thing. There was probably a more succinct way to do that, but I didn't plan any of this. So I just kind of started talking. Yeah, I was really thinking this would be super quick. Anyway, I better stop talking before it gets any longer. I hope that was a little bit interesting, kind of see how all this stuff is pieced together. You know a little about APIs, and go poke at other people's websites and see what they're doing. You can do that. It's not breaking rules. This is how the internet works. So, I mean, you can open this up on any site you want. Here's my to-do list from Google. They've got a network tab. Why is it making requests constantly? I couldn't tell you. I guess it was saving something. Log impression. Play Google Comlog. They're doing all kinds of stuff. What were they sending? A token includes info params. Where was this? Now I'm really curious. I haven't looked at this. Log impressions. Ooh. An impression batch. Didn't give us any responses, right? So whatever. You can go and poke and see what other websites are passing around. Here's some more JSON, right? I'm not making shit up. Everyone's using JSON. Yeah, I don't know. You can learn some interesting things, and if you were interested in trying to play SciPets purely through Insomnia, not SciPets, Poppy Seed Pets, purely through Insomnia, you could, or you could interact with other websites. It probably is very hard and very painful to do so, but it's a thing you can do. And this is a free tool, Insomnia, so have fun. Anyway, as promised earlier, I'm going to be quiet now. Thank you for watching. I'll continue to post these videos. Hopefully you continue to find them interesting. Goodbye.